Hello, this is Dan O'Brien and Guy Allen here with Kansas State University, talking about grain markets. We'd like to focus here on the second of two tapes we're putting out on this issue this morning. I'd like to focus on South American soybean and crop production in general, and how what trends have been happening there, and how that might affect U.S. grain markets and export prospects down the road.
Yeah, we're right in the middle of harvest down in both Brazil and Argentina, two of the bigger exporters, particularly for soybeans, but have a big impact on corn there as well, and competing with the U.S. On the soybean situation, I think it's good to remember China, who imports about 2/3 of the world's oilseeds, switches their import program last month from the U.S. to South America, and they'll typically import most of their soybeans from Brazil for the next 6 months until about September, October, when we start seeing the North American harvest come off. So the focus is really switched in the market to South America. Look, we've had some dry weather down there that's impacted the yield expectations, and they've come back quite a bit. Earlier this last week in the USDA reports, we've got Brazilian production now of corn down about 1.5 million metric tons to just over 100 million metric tons. Soybean production's come down about 4 or 5 metric tons to about 124 million metric tons. And
if I can add in on that, and so their independent reports from in country of 120, 121. So sometimes those will vary, but to the degree that the domestic numbers are more accurate, then that tightens them up and probably gives us a better opportunity, as from the U.S. point of view, to get involved in that market.
That's exactly right. We would, on the back of those private estimates, we would probably expect those USDA numbers to continue to come off. They're usually a bit slower to react to those changes than the private trade. But in the next month, when we finish up harvest down there, we'll have a better idea what their supplies are. And, Brazil or Argentina's production estimates have dropped down to about 50 million metric tons. While most of that's exported in products of meal and oil, it's still a drop in the total number. However, a thing to keep in mind, Brazil is expected to have a record monthly export for soybeans this month, as those numbers reach about 13.5 million metric tons into the international markets.
If I could throw in on that too, I think a question I don't have answered in my own mind is just how the COVID-19 situation is going to affect Brazil. They're at their national level, they took more of a hands-off approach, saying, we're just going to let the thing play out. We're going for herd immunity, and that may work, it might not. And if they get surprised on that, then there could be more disruption there than they're even planning on right now. Let's hope for their sake it doesn't, but I do wonder about that in that country.
Yeah, and we're also seeing an impact with the COVID-19 virus in the transportation sector. We've got to remember most of the transportation from farm to port is by truck, and there's been a bit of definitely a slowdown in the truck deliveries as we go through harvest, and a bit of regulatory government input into restrictions as a result of that, particularly in Brazil. That's definitely impacting the capacity to execute.
What do you see in Argentina?
Well, Argentina, most of that's getting processed. We're seeing a bit of implication down there with the virus. I think their approach has been very, very similar to Brazil. Again, it's very much a truck market delivery to port. The biggest thing we're seeing in Argentina is probably the draft restrictions up the Parana River at Rosario, which is a big loading port for exports, both of soybeans, oil, and meal. And the draft restrictions, they've dropped the Panamax 55,000 ton vessel. They've dropped it by about 7,500 tons. And I don't know whether they'll top those off when they get to Buenos Aires or just continue to ship those. But when you have that draft restrictions, it definitely increases your freight transportation costs for exports.
And backs things up, slows it up. And they had COVID-19 issues in their communities. The trucks were driving by, the towns were stopping them. So yes. I think I've read where that's been helped some, but these COVID-19 issues are not just affecting us; they're affecting these other competitive exporters, much less the buyers. Just to throw a issue out there for you, do you see countries, or you hear in your position with IGP of countries being more concerned about building up grain stocks for the sake of domestic security? You hear
Yeah,
that at all?
yeah. Look, definitely on the wheat situation, we've seen a good number of countries, particularly developing countries, step up and want to increase those stocks they hold of food grains, wheat and rice particularly. We've seen that definitely in India, which will be a significant buildup. China, as well as a lot of your African countries there as well. And I'm sure that's an underlying issues for a number of the importing countries. The other main one is Russia and the Ukraine. We've already seen export restrictions come in on that for the remainder of the year till their harvest comes down in July. So that should shift some of that business back to the U.S.
And I've read that with situations they're dealing with, that they're going to have awfully tight domestic stocks to use figures in those countries.
Yes.
So that all makes things pretty tight, potentially volatile in the wheat market in particular.
Exactly. We'll see that flow over. To go back to soybeans a bit, one of the underlying issues that I continue to keep an eye on and have for a long time is with China importing 2/3 of the world's oilseeds and that African swine fever impacting their swine herd, where you typically have about 2/3 of the world's hogs sit in China as well. It's just what the impact of that is going to be, how fast they can recover. I think it's going to be slower than expected, but trying to quantify that is quite difficult. But we continue to watch China's soybeans purchases as sort of a definite reflection of their management of the African swine fever situation. So we've sort of got two viral situations down there, one COVID-19, but I think we need to keep a big eye on this African swine fever situation as it continues to evolve.
And last comment I'd add in is that it affects China's pork, chicken, and beef imports. So that's the other side of the equation for us.
Oh, exactly.
Guy, thank you very much. Folks, thank you for listening to us here on this two-part approach to looking at international markets and factors that might be affecting us here in the U.S. Thank you very much.